Army Painter Speedpaints. I think we are a-feuding, as they say in Texas. Nobody in Texas says a-feuding. So I've had some questionable results in the past with Army Painter Speedpaints. And here's the thing. I love me some Army Painter. I've got a whole big rack of their acrylic paints that I love and I use almost every time I paint. But the speed paints, they just don't love me back. But I want to make sure that I give it every chance to succeed. And so in this short video, I'm going to do just that. Let's see what happens. So in another video, I'm painting up this guy. He is a Grey Knight's Nemesis Dreadnought. Kind of a cool looking, stompy robot boy. Okay, robot suit. Please nobody yell at me for that. And he was part of this big old box of Grey Knights that I bought a few weeks ago. And I had previously painted up all the infantry units to look like this, but I had a bit of a tussle with Army Speedpaints, which is what I use to paint these power swords. So I posted the video on YouTube, and as it turns out, whenever I post about Army Painter Speedpaints, I get more views than at any other time. I don't know what that means exactly, but I do know that I don't want it to mean that people think I hate Army Painter. I don't. I don't even hate Army Painter Speedpaints. I want to make them work. I just clearly haven't figured out the secret sauce. As so often happens when I post videos like this, someone in the comment section said something about, hey, have you tried using a varnish and then adding the Army Painter Speedpaints over that? And I had, but only kind of sort of. So I thought, you know what, let's give it a proper test. And so I broke out my favorite matte varnish, which is Tamiya Color's little tiny rattle can. I love this stuff. I use it for all of my models. And in this case, I'm going to use it as the ultimate test of the acrylic protection to prevent the bleed through on Army Painter Speedpaints to see if it works. So this stompy boy has a removable hand where I can add a thunder hammer. It probably has a special name because it's kind of ginormous. Or this big old sword. And you'll notice that it's white, but this is not going to be the color that the sword is going to end up with. The white, in this case, is just the undercoat over which I will add a bit of Army Painter Speed Paint. The idea here is I want a vibrant red emissive effect that I can only really get with Army Painter Speed Paints when they work. So I went outside, blasted these weapons with this stuff. And I mean blasted. There's a really thick coat of varnish on these weapons. Way more than I would normally use. But like I said, I want to give speed paints the best possible chance to succeed here. So I took special care because I wasn't sure how this was going to work. I took special care to make sure to minimize the amount of friction my brush was applying to the painted surface. Now, I know what you're probably thinking is, what do you mean friction? There's no friction. It's a brush. It's a very light thing. Well, in previous applications, I've noticed that if you kind of brushed, the bleed through would kind of accelerate across the direction of the brush. Like there was some kind of pressure, some kind of friction, however minuscule, that was encouraging the bleeding of the bleed through of the speed paint through the layers that were underneath. And sometimes it would peel off like a whole section along the brush stroke. So I wanted to be very careful. I didn't want to have any friction at all. So I ended up just saturating my brush with the paint, the speed paint, and just basically dotting and just very lightly applying the speed paint. As a result, there was a lot of speed paint that came off the brush, which was my intention, but it was a little too much. I lost control of just how much was being applied. But you know what? It was my first attempt at this in this way, and I don't know how necessary it was because, as it turns out, I think the acrylic did a pretty good job of preventing the bleed through. And by acrylic, I mean the varnish. I coated the entire weapon with this stuff. It turns out I missed a little spot. I thought I got it, but it turns out I didn't on the sword. But otherwise, it's bright red, just how I wanted it. So as I was applying the red speed paint to my well undercoated and varnished swords, well, and the hammer as well, and as I was applying it, very little, if any, bleed through. Yay! So once the speed paint was dry, I realized that while the color was basically where I wanted it, it was missing that shine that I got so used to. And that shine I've done in the past with some gloss varnish. But when I've done this in the past, I've also noted that there was some bleed through from the red speed paint up into the gloss varnish, such that the red speed paint, or the speed paint, was getting onto the brush that was full of the gloss. And so when I went in to my gloss varnish on my little dry palette, that little tray that I have, some of that paint was getting into the varnish. So there was more evidence of bleed through, so I wanted to be very careful not to repeat that mistake here. And I was largely successful, but it probably helped that once I had the speed paint layer nice and dry, I went over it with another coat of varnish. Was it necessary? I don't know, but my previous experience suggested that yes, probably it was necessary. So I did it, I let the varnish dry, and then I went back over it with some gloss varnish, and the results are pretty good. Now here is a real unforced error in that I was applying it so thickly that it dried kind of splotchy and it looks kind of gross. I didn't like that, but I wonder if future attempts at this same technique, I don't need to use quite as much of the varnish, or for that matter, the speed paint, so I could be more controlled in its application, since the varnish is going to do a decent job of stopping the bleed through. Will that work? I don't know, and I'm not going to try here, but future projects, you bet I'm going to give it a shot, because so far, it's working pretty well. Well, the last bit of paint that I was waiting on is dry, and I have some results, and I can sort of happily say that this technique, it does work. Let me show you the weapons, because these are the focus of this video, not this guy. There's another video for that. If you want to see him, go check that one out. So here they are. They're nice and bright red, and they're also very shiny from that gloss coat. There's that little spot on the sword that I missed. Oh well, that's fine. It's just a battle damage chip. Yeah. And I was going to start off this segment of the video with an apology to the Army Painter. But the more I thought about it, I don't know that that's really appropriate. And here's my position. Yes, I've just proven to myself that these speed paints are not fundamentally broken. You can use them. You can force them to work. That's good. It's certainly better than the alternative, which was they're completely useless, which, since we have so many people online using them, we know they're not useless. We just know that they're finicky AF to use. So yeah, this sandwiching technique will work. Basically, if you take extra pains to isolate the layer of speed paint in between two layers of relatively generous varnish spray, then yes, you can prevent paint bleed through these speed paints and basically use them for your projects. I suggest to you that perhaps that is not good enough. That is not an acceptable condition. I don't know of any other product that's sold in the hobby space that requires this sort of effort. Basically, make sure it doesn't touch anything else on your model if you don't want your model ruined. Who else would we accept that from and say, no, it's okay, that's fine, there's no problem here? I don't know of any hobby company that we normally interact with in a positive way, where those sorts of boundary conditions are acceptable. Now, it may be the case here that Army Painter has a special place in our heart, and it does. They have a wide variety of incredible products. They are one of the cornerstones of our hobby, Without that company and its products, our hobby space just wouldn't be as nice. But if you have that kind of goodwill in the community, you should take some steps to take care of them. For example, don't do this. Don't put out products that are going to interact poorly with other products. Test your products before you put them out, before you market them. If your products are finicky, make sure to tell us before you market them to us. We will buy some pretty crazy things for some pretty crazy kinds of money if you tell us how they work. If you surprise us, you say, hey, this is going to paint and it actually just makes your models smell, even if it's good smelling, that's not what we purchased. And your reputation is going to take a hit. Now, we are all humans, even those awesome people at Army Painter. We're going to make mistakes. But when I go to work and I make a mistake, the very first thing I do, the very first thing I actually do is to make sure that I made that mistake, right? Once I make sure that, oh, yep, it was me that messed up, okay. So the real public first step that I take is to admit that I made it. It was my bad. Here's what I did. Here's the consequence. Here is what I'm doing to fix it. You know what I don't do if I don't want to get fired? Pretend it wasn't an issue. Pretend that all those people who noticed the error were actually wrong or were using the product incorrectly. I'm looking at you, Apple. Admit it. It's your mistake, and that's fine. Make it right. Take steps to do better. We will be there for you because we've made mistakes too. But the only statement I've seen Army Painter make has to do with the separation on their acrylics. They made no mention in that apology video of about a year back that says, hey, we're sorry, we're adding another mixing ball to your paints. There, problem solved. No, that's a non-apology apology and is also unacceptable. There are a few other techniques that I've heard people say we could use to make speed paints work, and I'm still tempted to try them out. One of them is apply them with an airbrush, which, okay, I don't have an airbrush, but if that's what it takes, maybe that works. Somebody else mentioned something about like not using water-based chemicals. I don't really understand what that was about, but there are other ways, I think, of using these where you can get it to work and avoid the paint bleed through. And if people keep watching these videos, then maybe I'll keep making them. But maybe all this is in the past. Maybe this doesn't matter. Maybe Army Painter is fast at work, correcting their mistakes secretly, not telling us about it, and their next iteration of this product is going to blow our socks off, and they're going to be awesome, and everything I've said so far, I'm going to be wrong about. And that is okay. It's okay to be wrong when facts change, when you get more information, or when the situation changes. If Army Painter comes out with a new version of this product that doesn't have any bleed through, and it works the way they say it's going to work, then cool. I will be the first to give them the 2 big thumbs up. I think I'm done ranting. Am I? Yeah, I'm done. Hey, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your attention. Have a wonderful afternoon. Be nice to yourselves and each other. Peace.